Let's talk about conflict theory for a moment. There's a few types of natural cleavings, or easy cleavings, if not natural, where it's very easy to drive conflict between people. Political left-right is a very easy one. You can do red state, blue state stuff. You can do, they have a Make America Great Again hat versus a rainbow gay flag. Like they're literally wearing flags of different kinds to symbolize red shirt, blue shirt, right? Like the type of team they're in. And then you can drive conflict between them, which both creates a sense of clear sense making of, I know who my team is. I know what the group think of the narrative on my side is. And so red, blue is very easy. People versus the cops is very easy. Race issues are very easy. Race is maybe the easiest because it's where the flag is biologically built in. If everybody here has not studied conflict theory, you're going to have a hard time making sense of the world without a good model of how conflict arises between people, how it gets intentionally stirred up, how people resolve it. And there's a lot of different schools of conflict theory that are worth studying, but at minimum, everybody should know René Girard's work. And I'm not saying that I agree with Girard. There are things that he said that were extremely insightful. So specifically, his idea is that the fundamental nature of conflict comes from the fact that desire is mimetic, meaning that we learn to want stuff the same way we learn language, by watching other people. And that I don't know Mandarin and I don't know Swahili and I don't know Dutch because I didn't watch people speaking those. I watched people speaking English. So I got conditioned to think in a worldview through aesthetic frames, through, like, it's very deep how much my whole identity and everything was conditioned by what I watched. So his argument is that much of what we want is also conditioned by watching people. And so we end up innately wanting what other people have, which means that desire inexorably drives conflict. People have stuff, you want that thing or similar kinds of things. Then as more people are wanting the same things and conflicting over it, the conflict itself becomes mimetic. People learn through mimesis to identify with the Zionist or the anti-Zionist side based on which side of the wall they grew up on, or whatever the conflict they happen to have been born into. And then in Girard's model, the conflict continues to increase until there's so much embodied energy that you're going to get something like a war. And the least violent way to deal with it is to have a scapegoat, a sacrificial, rather than a all against all war, be able to have some sacrificial person that everybody gets, that is able to be effectively blamed for the whole scenario. And then we're able to take them out and decrease the embodied conflict energy for a while, and then the cycle has to repeat. Girard's work really says that there historically has been no way out of that, and the role of various religions was to figure out how to do scapegoating well, and that's what all of the sacrifices of various religious traditions were about. That Christianity was actually trying to get rid of scapegoating by showing that the person they scapegoated was actually innocent, and not only innocent, but the highest kind of innocent, so that the way people would get out of his answer, actually, of how you get out of scapegoating, was everyone develop Christ-like virtues. But specifically, his critique said that by getting rid of religion, and this is relevant to the goals of this group that is trying to re-invoke some of the things religion did, like the development of human virtue. By getting rid of religion, we got rid of the way of dealing with the mimetic conflict, while simultaneously getting much, much larger weapons of destruction. Okay, so why am I bringing that up? I think it's very easy I think there are lots of reasons to want to drive conflict and to want to keep groups of people having attention focused in different ways. maybe this is actually the way I'll talk about it. Power pretty much translates to power over other people. To have power over their behaviors, whether I want people to vote for me in a particular way, or I want them to buy my stuff, or I want them to publicly support my ideas, I need to control other people's behavior. To control their behavior, I need to control their minds. And so warfare is mainly not fought with bullets. Like the kinetic warfare that we think of as warfare that's fought with weapons is maybe 1% of warfare. 99% of warfare is diplomatic warfare, political warfare, economic warfare, narrative warfare, information warfare. All of this comes together to what we call hybrid warfare, or really just politics or game theory or the game of power. But think of it as hybrid or population-centric warfare. So in this war, the treasure being fought over is people's minds, and the battleground is people's minds. The primary weapons are tools of narrative influence and emotional evocation and control of the information flows. And in these wars, they're asymmetric wars because you have some actors that have access to billion or trillion dollar level information technologies, AI empowered micro-targeting. And then you have other people that are just trying to figure shit out on their own, and they don't even know they're in a war. And they don't even know that their own mind is the battleground of the war, and they think they believe the shit they believe, and they think they came to it on their own. They think they're doing a good job sense making. And they don't realize that as they're researching, of the trillions of pages of shit they could see, the ones that they will ever even be able to see based on what shows up in their YouTube feed or their Google search were manipulated by algorithms that have agendas behind them. As well as the original source material of whoever put it out for which reasons. Okay, so zooming out from the current violence for a moment, we have an election coming up in the US that will be radically consequential for the world. Either way, no matter who wins currently, whether the election is illegally tampered with and stolen or not, half of the population will think it was. This is a real problem, right? Because what happens when a third to a half of the population, no matter which way it goes, thinks that it was stolen and thinks it was radically consequential? Well, like one of two really bad things happens. Either the people get violent, much more so than we currently have, and that sets off one whole cascade of scenarios, where they don't get violent. And the people who want to steal elections get even clearer that they just can with impunity. So we're like, fuck, what do we do with this moving forward? Now, mail-in ballots. Are mail-in ballots easier to corrupt than in-person voting? Yep, totally. And COVID as one reason, violence could be another, but COVID is one reason to have mail-in ballots. Like, might there be reasons associated with that? Yeah. Now, might there be reasons that people who really want Trump out of office would want to initiate things that make Trump look worse and that say, look at all the bad shit that's happening during Trump? We could also talk about what motives the Trump campaign would have to be engaged in something where you wouldn't want transfer of power to occur. So I'm not there. There's a version of this that is easy to buy for either political leaning. I don't find that most successful politicians that I have encountered near the top of the power actually believe red versus blue ideology. They just believe in the game of power, and they signal red versus blue ideology as part of their mimetic warfare to control the people that are going to vote for them. Just like I don't think most of the people that end up engaging religions and holy wars at the most strategic level really even are religious. I think they know that these are ways to get people to do things for reasons that are mostly strategic. As we look at war a little bit more and we look at the tension heating up on the India-China border, is such a big deal. Like what's happening there, and the India-China-Pakistan interaction and the India-China-Russia interaction. And as we look at it with COVID-related stuff, obviously what happens to the spread of the virus with all of the protests that are definitely not social distancing? Well, we'll find out. What happens when, like with Germany and South Korea and China, who started to get second waves of infection after reopening? What happens when we start to get second waves here and the political tension is so heated around the idea of closing again? And then we also start to see things like, because of the COVID shutdown of transportation, the food supply system got radically damaged, right? Give or take, the food supply for 2 billion people got damaged. And so Nigeria has a 25 million person insecure food population that all went from food insecure to actually don't have food. And now violence has been raising on the ground, both insurgencies, local crime, and Boko Haram. That's probably going to trigger an exodus and a massive refugee situation. But after Syria, it's like, where do the refugees go? So then what comes from that conflict-wise? So we're definitely at a unique moment in the world. We're at a moment where, because of the connectedness of supply chains, because of the ability for viruses in airplanes to move around the world so fast, because of the ability of news cycles to move so fast, so we go from an event in Minneapolis to in every city, because of those things, the interconnection for the cascade of events from anywhere to everywhere and from one sector to other sectors is so high, on top of systemic fragility, on top of very high embodied emotional energy. This next phase of time is going to see a continuance of a cascade of very serious problems.